Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today with a question that feels a little bit like a riddle.
Oh, I like riddles.
Okay, good. When you think of the concept of American empire, and I don't mean, a political empire, I mean an economic one, the kind that really defines how we live,
Yeah.
what comes to mind, you probably think of the big, sweeping monopolists, right?
Sure. Yeah, immediately you think of Carnegie and steel, or Rockefeller and oil.
Exactly.
Or if we're looking at the modern era, maybe Bezos and Amazon, or the guys in Silicon Valley, the people who changed the actual infrastructure of the
Well,
world.
titans.
Yeah.
That's what we look at. But today, I want to make an argument that the truest reflection of the American economic roller coaster over the last century, I'm talking the humble rise, the massive debt-fueled explosion, and then the sudden digital disintegration, isn't found in a steel mill.
Okay.
And it's not in a server farm in California. It's found in a little hat shop in York, Pennsylvania.
A hat shop. That sounds improbable, to say the least. A hat shop.
It does, doesn't it? But we are talking about the Bon-Ton. Now, depending on where you grew up, that name either unlocks this very specific sensory memory, the smell of perfume counters, back-to-school shopping with your mom, the squeak of sneakers on a mall floor.
I can smell it right now.
Right. Or it means absolutely nothing to you.
And that divide is actually crucial to the story we're telling today, because the Bon-Con is the perfect case study of a regional power player. It wasn't Walmart. It wasn't trying to be everything to everyone everywhere.
Yeah.
It was trying to be something to someone in a very specific part of the country.
And we've pulled everything for this. The historical records, the financial filings, the bankruptcy court documents, the Wikipedia archives to piece it all together. And honestly, it reads less like a business biography and more like a tragedy.
It really does. It's a story about ambition, about family legacy, the massive explosion of consumer culture in the 20th century, and then the very sharp, very painful reality of how the retail world changed.
So our mission today is to trace this very specific, almost haunting trajectory. We need to figure out how a single-room millinery, literally a one-room store, selling hats and dry goods in Pennsylvania.
Right.
How did that grow into a billion-dollar retail empire that held the keys to nearly every famous regional department store name in the Midwest, only to just vanish?
Well, vanish from the physical world, at least. As we'll see, it didn't entirely disappear. It just migrated. It became a ghost.
A corporate ghost story like that. But before we get to the ghosts and, the bankruptcies, we have to understand the life. We have to look at the birth. So let's set the scene. We are traveling back to the very end of the 19th century.
1898, a completely different world.
We are in York, Pennsylvania. Now, for those who don't know York, this isn't Paris, this is not New York City, this is industrial Pennsylvania. It's gritty, it's hardworking. And here we have a father and son duo, Samuel Grumbacher and his son, Max.
And they decide to open a store. But this isn't a department store yet, not in the way we think of it at all. It was called S. Grumbacher and Son.
Which is a very reliable, very literal name. Tells you what you need to know.
Exactly. S. Grumbacher and Son. It tells you exactly who owns it. And it was a millinery and dry goods store.
Millinery. So that's hats, primarily.
That is hats. And fabric. You have to imagine the scale here. Just one single room on Market Street.
Yeah.
No escalators, no bright lights at the cosmetic counters, just floor-to-ceiling shelves of bolts of fabric and ladies' hats.
It's incredibly humble.
Yeah.
But they obviously had ambitions beyond just that one room, because pretty quickly they decided that S. Grumbacher and Son wasn't going to cut it if they wanted to grow.
No, you need a brand. You need something with a little more flair.
And they found it. By 1902, so just 4 years later, they adopted the name Bon-Ton.
Bon-Ton.
It has a ring to it, but I looked into this, and it's a fascinating choice for 1902 industrial Pennsylvania. Where does that come from?
It's an amazing choice. It is derived from a British term, actually, though it has French roots. Le bon ton effectively means good tone or good form.
Good tone.
Yeah, it connotes the elite, high society, the fashionable world.
See, that is a brilliant psychological play. You're in York, Pennsylvania. You're surrounded by factories and industry, and you name your store the elite.
Yes.
You aren't just selling a hat. You're selling a feeling. You're telling the customer, if you shop here, you have taste. You're sophisticated.
Exactly. It's aspirational branding 101, way before modern marketing textbooks even existed. Even if you're just in a small town, you want to feel like you're part of that high society. It was an incredibly smart move for the turn of the century.
And it clearly worked, didn't it? Because they didn't stay in that one little room for very long.
No, not at all. By that same year, 1902, the records show they had already expanded. They had locations in Trenton, New Jersey, and then just all across Pennsylvania: Carlisle, Lancaster, Lebanon, Altoona, East Liverpool.
Whoa, hold on. Let's pause on the logistics of that for a second.
Okay.
This is 1902. We don't have interstate highways. We don't have the internet for inventory management.
Yeah.
Expanding from York, PA to Trenton, NJ. That is not a small feat for a 4-year-old company.
No, it's a huge undertaking, and it shows that the Grumbackers understood scale very early on. They weren't content with being the local shopkeeper where everyone knows your name.
Right.
They wanted a network. They were building a supply chain before that term was really in vogue.
And then, as we move through the early 20th century, the family dynamic seems to really solidify. They incorporate in 1929.
Ooh, right before the crash.
Talk about timing. Oof.
Well, they survived it. They incorporated as S. Grumbacker and Son, Inc. But the family succession piece is really interesting here. Max, the founder's son, he eventually brings his own son, Max Samuel, who went by MS, into the fold in 1931. So we are on generation 3 by the early 30s.
And this is when it really becomes an institution.
Yeah.
But then tragedy strikes. Max, the co-founder, he dies in 1933.
And that's such a pivotal moment for any family business. We see this all the time in history. The founder dies and the kids squabble, or they sell it off, or the whole thing just loses its vision.
But that's not what happened here at all.
No. His widow, Daisy, and her 2 sons, MS and Richard, they carried it on. They formed a partnership in 1936. It really cements the idea that this was a family empire. It wasn't some faceless corporation yet. It was the Grumbackers.
I found this little nugget in the research that I absolutely loved. Because you know you've made it in American culture when you start getting referenced in pop culture.
Right, that's the real test.
And apparently, the Bon Ton was famous enough to be a destination on Fibber McGee and Molly.
The classic radio show. No way!
This show aired from 1935 to 1959. It was massive. It was like a primetime sitcom today. And there's a recurring bit where a character references going to the Bon Ton.
That is hugely significant. It's like getting name-dropped in a Marvel movie or a Taylor Swift song today.
Totally.
It means the writers assumed that a national audience would hear Bon Ton and immediately understand, okay, they're going to a fancy department store.
It validates their status. They had successfully associated the name Bon Ton with that high society aspiration they planted all the way back in 1902.
They had won the mind share. But the real explosion, the thing that turns them from a successful regional chain into a dominant force, that happens after World War II.
Right. So we come out of the Depression, we come out of the war, the GIs come home, suburbs are built, and the American consumer economy it explodes.
This is the birth of the middle class as the economic engine of the world. And Bon Ton was positioned perfectly to serve them. This is where we see the birth of their defining strategy. We call it the adjacent strategy.
Adjacent strategy. I want to unpack this because it sounds simple, but I feel like there's a real genius in the simplicity. What does that mean in practice?
So imagine you're looking at a map. A lot of companies, when they want to expand, they look for the best market. They might say, oh, Los Angeles is booming, let's open a store there, even if they are based in Pennsylvania.
Right. Go where the money is. The big city.
But Bon Ton didn't do that. They grew by creeping into the town next door. They expanded into areas that were geographically touching their existing footprint. It's like an ink blot spreading on a piece of paper.
So slow and steady. More methodical.
It's calculated. I mean, think about the logistics. If you open a store in the next town over, you can use the same delivery trucks.
Oh, sure.
Your district managers can drive there and be back home for dinner. Your radio ads in York might bleed over into Hanover, so you're already getting free marketing. It's incredibly efficient.
That makes total sense. So walk us through how this looked in those post-war years.
Okay, so in 1946, they open a new store in Hanover, Pennsylvania. That's very close to York, their home base. Then in 1948, they make their first move out of state in a while, into Maryland, by acquiring Irelees in Hagerstown.
Acquiring Irelees. Okay, this is a key distinction. This is the first time we see them buying an existing business rather than just building a new store from scratch, right?
Exactly, and that distinction is absolutely crucial to their future. Buying an existing store gives you the customer base, the location, and the staff immediately.
It's a shortcut.
It's a shortcut to loyalty. You don't have to convince people to shop at a new store. You just take over the store they already love.
And they kept doing this.
They did. In 1957, they purchased McMeans in Lewistown, PA. And notice the patience here. This is what really strikes me. They buy McMeans, but they don't just slap the Bon Ton sign on it immediately.
They don't.
No, they run it as McMeans for 12 years.
12 years. They waited until 1969 to change the name.
Yes. They waited until they had earned the trust of the community, or maybe until the generational attachment to the old name faded a bit. Then they rebranded. It shows they weren't arrogant. They respected the local culture they were buying into.
And we have to talk about the next generation of Grumbackers coming in around this time. Because in 1961, M. Thomas Grumbacker enters the scene. We called him Tim.
Tim Grumbacker.
Yeah.
He is a massive figure in this story. He's the fourth generation. He comes in 61 and eventually becomes CEO in 1985. He is the architect of the modern Bon-Ton, the one that really became a giant.
And under his watch, we see the big shift toward the shopping mall.
The mall boom, the 1970s. This changed everything for American retail. Before this, department stores were these grand downtown destinations. You'd put on your Sunday best and go downtown.
Right.
But in the 70s, the action moved to the suburbs.
The shopping center became the new town square.
And the department store became the anchor. You know how malls always have those huge stores at the ends?
Of course, the ones that are 2 stories tall and have their own entrances from the parking lot.
Those are anchors, and their job is to draw people to the mall so they'll then walk past the Gap and the pretzel stand and everything in between. Bon-Ton rode this wave hard. They opened 11 new stores in PA and West Virginia during the 70s, mostly as these big mall anchors.
It feels like the golden age, doesn't it? The mall was the center of the universe.
Yeah.
And Bon-Ton was one of the kings of that universe.
It was. But then by the 1980s, the atmosphere started to change. The industry began to consolidate. It wasn't enough to just build new stores anymore. The market was getting saturated, and the big fish were starting to eat the little fish.
And Bon-Ton, under Tim Grumbacker, decided they weren't going to be the little fish.
No, they wanted to be the shark.
They really did.
They did. In the 80s, they established a division called Maxwell's. They acquired a chain called LS Good, which included the Fowler's department stores. But the big move, the one that really signaled their intent to dominate the entire region, was in 1987.
The Pomeroy's deal.
Yes. They bought the 11-store Pomeroy's chain from Allied department stores.
Allied. I mean, Allied was a huge national player. Buying from them must have been a statement.
It was a massive statement. It was like a minor league team buying a player from the Yankees. And strategically, think back to that adjacent strategy. This single deal allowed Bon-Ton to enter 7 new markets in Pennsylvania instantly.
Boom. Just like that.
Just like that. Instead of spending 10 years building 7 stores, hiring 7 managers, fighting for permits, you sign 1 check and you own the region. This is the adjacent strategy on steroids.
So by the end of the 80s, they are a serious regional power. They own Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But then we hit the 90s. And if the 80s were about consolidation, the 90s for Bon-Ton seemed to be about, well, a frenzy.
It's a shopping spree. There is no other way to put it. They started buying up other companies as if they were collecting baseball cards.
Let's just look at the timeline here because it is breathless. 1991, they acquired J.W. Rhodes in Ithaca, New York.
Right.
1992, they buy Watton Shand in Lancaster.
And Watton Shand is a great example of their dominance. That was a beloved local institution in Lancaster. They had this beautiful downtown store and a big mall store at Park City Center. Bon-Ton buys them, and suddenly they own the Lancaster market. There's no major competition left.
It's aggressive. 1993, they push into the New York metro area, Saratoga Springs. They buy Mailman's, another local competitor right in their backyard in York. It feels like they are just buying everything in sight.
They're capturing market share by force. They're terrified of competitors like Macy's or someone coming in, so they just buy everyone first. But then comes 1994, the mega year.
This is the big one. They purchased the Adam, Meldrum, and Anderson Company.
AMNA's, based in Buffalo, New York.
And this company was 127 years old. It had survived the Civil War.
It was a true legacy brand, a Buffalo institution. And Bon-Ton paid $42.6 million for it.
Whoa. Okay, let's pause on that number. $42.6 million in 1994.
If you adjust that for inflation, that is over $80 million today. For a regional acquisition, that is a massive outlay of cash. It showed they were willing to spend very, very big to win.
So what did they get for that $80+ million?
They got a dominant position in the Buffalo market, but they also made a controversial move here, one that I think signals a real shift in their philosophy. Remember how they waited 12 years to rename McMeans?
Right, the patient approach.
With AMNA's, they didn't wait. They converted all the locations to the Bon-Ton name almost immediately.
So they erased 127 years of history overnight.
Effectively, yes. And that's a huge risk. You're betting that the Bon-Ton brand is strong enough to replace a local icon that people's great-grandparents shopped at.
How did that go over?
In Buffalo, that ruffled a lot of feathers. It felt corporate. It felt like an invasion, like this company from Pennsylvania was coming in and telling them their history didn't matter.
And they didn't even stop there in '94. They also bought chapels in Syracuse and Hess's in Allentown.
Hess's is another tragedy for the retail historians out there. I mean, Hess's was legendary. The flagship store in Allentown was famous for its patio restaurant, its wild celebrity fashion shows. It was pure glamour in the Lehigh Valley.
Okay, so a real destination.
A total destination. Bon-Ton bought it, kept the flagship open for about 2 years,
And then?
closed it in 1996, and then it was demolished.
Ouch. That has to hurt the local community. You buy the town jewel and then you tear it down.
It does. But from a cold, hard business perspective, they would argue the flagship was an oversized, inefficient relic in a dying downtown, and the real value was in the mall locations.
Sure.
But emotionally, it severs a tie with the customer. It tells them, we care about efficiency, not your memories.
So they are expanding aggressively into New York. They enter New England for the first time in 1998 with a store in Westfield, Massachusetts. They're growing, growing, growing. But as we enter the 2000s, the stakes get even higher. We're moving from millions of dollars to billions.
And this is Section 4, the billion-dollar gamble.
It really was a gamble, wasn't it?
The biggest of their lives. And ultimately, it was the one that they lost.
It all starts in 2003 with the Elder Beerman deal.
Right. Elder Beerman was a chain based in Ohio and the lower Midwest. They had 68 stores.
68 stores. That's huge. That's not a local acquisition anymore. That's almost a merger of equals.
It is, and the backstory is interesting. Elder Beerman was actually trying to go private. They had a deal on the table to sell to a private equity group, but Bon-Ton swooped in at the last minute and offered more cash.
They outbid the privatization deal. They were that hungry for that Midwest territory.
They wanted those stores badly, but there was a warning sign here, wasn't there? A little crack in the foundation. It came just 1 month after this massive deal, in November of 2003.
Yes. They reported a Q3 net loss of $1.7 million.
Now, I want to be fair here. Mergers are expensive. You have legal fees, integration costs, all that. So some turbulence is expected.
Of course.
But posting a loss immediately after a massive expansion puts immense pressure on you. You need those new stores to perform immediately to cover the debt you just took on.
And instead of slowing down to digest that meal to make sure Elder Beerman was integrated and profitable, they went for an even bigger feast in 2005.
The Saks Northern Department Store Group purchase.
Okay, lay this one on us, because the numbers here are just staggering.
The single deal effectively doubled the size of the company overnight. They paid $1.1 billion.
$1.1 billion with a B. For a company that started in a one-room hat shop, that's the American dream and maybe the American nightmare, all rolled into one.
It really is. They bought 142 stores from Saks. Now, to be clear, these weren't the fancy Saks Fifth Avenue luxury stores.
Right.
These were the regional department store chains that Saks had been collecting in its portfolio.
We're talking about names that are just legendary in their own regions, like Carson Peary Scott.
Carson's, yes, based in Chicago, a retail legend. Bergner's in Illinois, Boston Store in Wisconsin, Herberger's in the upper Midwest, Yonkers in Iowa.
These are iconic names. If you grew up in Des Moines, Yonkers was the store. If you were in Milwaukee, it was the Boston store. It was part of the fabric of the city.
They are, and this is where the strategy shifted again. Remember what they did with M&A's in Buffalo?
Renamed them Bon-Ton immediately.
Right, but with this massive Saks deal, they didn't do that. They kept the local names.
So if you were in Chicago, you still went to a store called Carson's. The sign on the building didn't change. But it was all owned and operated by Bon-Ton back in York, Pennsylvania.
Correct. Corporate headquarters stayed in York, but they moved the merchandising headquarters, the people deciding what clothes to sell, to Milwaukee, which was the old Saks Northern Group hub.
So why keep the names this time? Why create this complicated house of brands structure?
I think they learned their lesson from the 90s. They realized that a name like Carson Peary Scott had immense local equity. That name meant something deep to generations of Chicagoans. Turning a Carson's into a Bon-Ton might just alienate the Chicago shopper who grew up with Carson's and had no idea what a Bon-Ton even was.
That makes sense. But it also creates a really confusing brand identity, doesn't it? From the inside, you're running a dozen different banners.
It adds a ton of complexity. You have to manage marketing for all these different names, even if the back-end supply chain is the same. But the bigger issue wasn't the names on the stores. It was the money.
The leverage, the debt.
Exactly. To pay $1.1 billion, they didn't write a check from their savings account. They borrowed it, they issued bonds, they took on massive, massive debt.
And here is where the tragedy of timing comes in. Just look at the calendar.
It's 2005, then 2006. They're still going. They buy 4 more stores, Parisian stores from another company, Belk. They are flying high. They feel invincible.
And then, 2008,
Great Recession.
the entire world collapses.
It was catastrophic timing. I mean, you can't imagine a worse scenario. They just spent over $1 billion leveraging themselves to the hilt to buy all these department stores, betting that the American consumer would keep spending money at the mall forever.
And then the exact opposite happened.
The housing market crashed, credit froze completely, and consumer spending fell off a cliff.
Talk about a perfect storm. It's unbelievable.
It was the poison pill. If they had stayed smaller, stayed regional, maybe they would still be here today. Maybe not. But the debt from that 2005 deal is what ultimately guaranteed their demise. There was no escaping it.
And this leads us directly into the next phase. I call this the zombie phase, the slow stagnation. From 2011 to 2017, the numbers are, well, they're grim.
Grim is polite. From 2011 through 2017, the BondCon did not post a single net profit.
Wait, I just want to make sure the listener really hears that. Not one profitable year. For 6 straight years.
Not one. Every single year. For 6 years, they were losing money.
How do you even survive that? How do you keep the doors open for 6 years if you are consistently in the red?
You survive on credit. You survive by refinancing your debt, kicking the can down the road. You survive by cutting costs everywhere you can, firing people, reducing inventory, deferring maintenance on the stores.
So the stores start to look a little shabby.
Exactly. The carpet gets worn, a light bulb burns out, and doesn't get replaced. You are essentially a zombie company. You're just walking. You are working just to pay the interest on your loans. You aren't growing. You aren't innovating. You're just treading water while holding a very heavy rock.
And during this time, we see the old guard, the people who built the company, starting to leave.
Yes. Mike Nemwar, a senior VP who had been there for 40 years, he retired in 2014. And then the big one, Tim Grumbacher.
The architect, the man who pushed the adjacent strategy and built the empire.
He retired in 2017. He had been on the board for 50 years and chairman for over 25. His wife, Debra Simon, succeeded him, but it really signaled the end of an era. The man who built the modern Bonton was stepping away just as the walls were closing in.
Now, to be fair, they did try to innovate during this time. It wasn't just them sitting there waiting to die. I read about this close-to-home initiative in 2016.
It was a really interesting idea, actually. They launched these dedicated areas in 45 of their stores that featured merchandise from local designers and artisans. Hand-picked stuff, not mass-produced.
It sounds like they were trying to be, well, not a department store. They were trying to be a boutique, to be more like Etsy.
They were trying to fight the big box fatigue. People were getting tired of generic malls where every store looked the same no matter what state you were in. They wanted something authentic, something local. Bonton tried to give them that inside the department store.
They even planned to expand it to 100 stores in 2017.
It was a smart, strategic attempt to differentiate themselves. But you have to look at the scale of the problem. When you are billions of dollars in debt and haven't made a profit in 6 years, is selling some locally made jewelry in a corner of the store enough to save the ship?
Probably not. It feels like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
A little bit, yeah. It was a good idea, but it was too little, too late. The structural damage from the debt was already done.
And then the iceberg hits. Section 6, the collapse.
And it happened incredibly fast. Frighteningly fast.
We're in December 2017. The holiday season? This should be the best time of year for retailers. This is when they make their year.
It should be. But for Bonton, sales had already fallen 6% in Q2 and Q3 leading up to the holidays. And then the news broke. They revealed they could not make a $14 million interest payment due on December 15th.
$14 million. Now, that sounds like a lot of money to me and you, but for a company that spent $1.1 billion a decade earlier, missing a $14 million payment, that sounds like they're completely dry. No cash left.
They were running on fumes, and the market reacted instantly. S&P downgraded their credit rating to selective default.
What does that mean exactly in plain English? Selective default.
It means the credit agencies are telling the world they are not paying some of their bills. Do not lend them money. More importantly, do not ship them goods on credit.
That's the killer.
It's the death knell. If suppliers, the people who make the clothes and the perfume, stop shipping you product because they don't think you can pay them, your shelves go empty. And if your shelves are empty, customers stop coming. It's a death spiral you can't get out of.
So February 2018 rolls around.
They announced they are closing 47 stores to optimize. This is standard bankruptcy playbook stuff. You try to shrink the footprint to save the core business.
And then they officially file for Chapter 11. Now, I want to clarify something here for the listeners.
Yep.
Chapter 11 isn't necessarily the end of the company, right?
No, and that's a very common misconception. Chapter 11 is reorganization bankruptcy. It means we want to stay in business, we just need the court to help us renegotiate and fix our debts. They didn't want to die, they wanted to restructure, shed some of that massive debt, and keep operating the profitable stores.
And for a moment, there was a glimmer of hope, right? In April 2018, there was a rescue attempt.
There was, from Washington Prime Group and Namdar Realty Group. And it's interesting who they were. These are mall owners.
Why would a mall owner want to buy a failing department store?
Because they needed the anchor tenants. Think about it from their perspective. If Bon-Ton closes, the malls have these giant, empty two-story holes at their ends.
Right.
And a lot of times, the smaller stores, the Gaps, the candle shops, have clauses in their leases that say, if the anchor store leaves, I can leave too, or I can pay half rent. It's called a co-tenancy clause.
So the mall owners were trying to save themselves by saving Bon-Ton.
Exactly. They were trying to plug the huge hole in their own boat.
So they made an offer. It looked like Bon-Ton might actually survive in some smaller form, but it fell apart over something incredibly specific, something that, honestly, it makes me angry just reading about it.
The work fee.
A $500,000 work fee. Explain this.
The deal that the mall owners proposed included a payment of $500,000 to the investors for the work related to putting the transaction together. A bankruptcy judge looked at this fee and said, no, I'm rejecting this payment.
Wait, pause. I just want to process this. We have a multi-million-dollar rescue deal for a retail chain with over 200 stores, thousands and thousands of jobs, and a century of American history. And the entire deal failed because a judge said no to a $500,000 fee.
It was the deal breaker. The investors refused to waive the fee, the judge refused to approve it, and the deal collapsed. Just like that.
That is just, it's heartbreaking. $500,000.
Yeah.
That's the cost of a nice house in the suburbs. And it toppled a retail empire.
It shows you how fragile the situation really was at the end. When you are that close to the edge, a stiff breeze or a small dispute over a fee is enough to push you over.
And once that deal died, there were no other buyers who actually wanted to run the company.
No. The only people left at the auction table were the liquidators.
The vultures.
The Great American Group and Tiger Capital Group. Their business is not running stores. It is selling everything inside them for pennies on the dollar and locking the doors for good.
And they paid $775.5 million.
Which was just enough to pay off the secured creditors, the big banks. The court approved it. And the Chapter 11 reorganization officially converted to a Chapter 7.
Which means liquidation.
Total liquidation. All 267 stores, everything must go. The clothes, the racks, the mannequins, the shelves, the cash registers.
August 30, 2018.
The end of the physical road. All Pennsylvania locations closed. By the next day, the buildings were vacated. 120 years of history, from that little hat shop in 1898 to a billion-dollar giant, gone in a single summer.
And here's where the story gets really weird and really modern.
Mm.
It wasn't totally gone. The buildings were empty, yes. The employees were all sent home. But the Bon-Ton didn't die. It just went to the cloud.
Section 7, the digital afterlife. This is the most modern and frankly kind of dystopian part of the whole story.
So the stores are closed, the websites go dark, but they have a stay tuned message.
And then the intellectual property, the IP, goes up for sale at the bankruptcy auction.
Who buys the soul of Bon-Ton?
A tech holding company called CSC Generation. They own other online brands, things like Direct Buy.
And how much did they pay for the Bon-Ton brand? Well, let's just remember, Bon-Ton themselves paid $1.1 billion for the Saks Group just 13 years earlier.
CSC paid $900,000.
900,000. Not even $1 million.
Less than $1 million. For the branding, the trademarks, the websites, and most importantly, the customer database.
That is a destruction of value that is hard to comprehend, from billions to less than $1 million.
It really highlights what the market thought the brand was worth without the actual stores. But here is the really fascinating detail. That $900,000 wasn't the only IP sale. L'Oreal USA, the beauty giant, separately bid on something else.
What do they want? They didn't want the brand name.
No, they paid $312,900 just for the data on the cosmetics and fragrance customers.
Wait, get out of here. So the list of people who bought perfume and makeup at Bon-Ton was worth a third of the entire value of the Bon-Ton, Carson's, and Yonkers brands combined.
Exactly. In the modern economy, the customer data knowing that you buy Lancome night cream at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday is almost as valuable as the 100-year-old trademark.
Hmm.
L'Oreal didn't care about the stores. They wanted the emails. They wanted the direct line to the consumer.
That is both chilling and brilliant at the same time.
It's the reality of the data economy we live in. That database had 24.5 million customer records. That was a real prize.
So CSE buys a brand, they relaunch the websites, they're selling clothes, home goods, even TVs and appliances, and they even tried to open one physical store, right? In Illinois, in Evergreen Park.
A concept store. A test.
How'd that go?
It opened, and then COVID-19 hit a few months later. It closed permanently in October 2020.
So the physical revival was dead on arrival.
Pretty much. Then in 2021, the brand was sold again to a company called brandx.com.
Brand X. That sounds like a placeholder name you'd see in a movie script.
It's a real company.
Yeah.
And they own the names now. Bergner's, Boston Store, Carson's, Elder Beerman, Herberger's, Yonkers, they're all just tabs on a website now. They exist only as URLs.
So if I go to Bonton.com today or Carsons.com, I can buy stuff.
You can, but you have to understand what you're actually doing. You aren't buying from the Grumbacher family. You aren't buying from a merchant in Milwaukee who carefully selected that sweater for the fall season.
No.
You're buying from a digital holding company that plugs into a global supply chain. The name is just a skin. It's a logo they bought at a bankruptcy auction to put on top of a generic e-commerce platform.
It's a ghost wearing the skin of the department store we grew up with.
That is a very vivid and a very accurate way to put it. It's brand necromancy. They're resurrecting the dead for marketing purposes.
So let's wrap this all up. Let's try to make sense of this journey. We've gone from a family hat shop in York to a generic website owned by a company called Brand X.
I think if you connect this to the bigger picture, the story of Bon-Ton is really the story of the 20th century American middle class and the retail that served it.
It followed the people.
It did. It started in the town center when that's where people lived and worked in the 1900s. It moved to the malls when the suburbs exploded in the 60s and 70s. It consolidated in the 80s and 90s when efficiency and scale became God. And it collapsed when debt and the internet finally took over. It's a perfect mirror.
It's also just such a stark lesson about the danger of debt.
Absolutely. That $1.1 billion purchase in 2005 was the turning point. It was the fatal decision. They bet the entire house right before the housing market crashed.
Terrible luck.
Terrible luck, but also hubris. If they had avoided that debt, maybe they could have shrunk gracefully. Maybe they'd still be a small, profitable regional chain in Pennsylvania and Ohio. But the debt took away all of their options.
And now the only real value left is just data.
24.5 million customer records, 5.6 million emails. That was the final asset. The buildings are empty or they've been converted into gyms or Amazon warehouses, but the list of names survives.
It really makes you think about what a brand actually is. Is it the building? Is it the people who work there? Is it the memories you have of shopping there with your family? Or is it just the logo and the email list?
In 2026, it seems it's mostly the latter. The logo and the list are what have value.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on, listeners. The next time you see an ad pop up on your Instagram or Facebook for a Carson's or a Bon-Ton or even a Toys R's a Toyer today, just take a second. Ask yourself, are you buying from a trusted friend from your childhood? Or are you just interacting with a purchase database that knows you have a weakness for sales, wearing the costume of a memory you trust?
That is the defining question of the digital retail age, isn't it? Who are you really buying from?
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. It's been a wild ride from York, Pennsylvania to the digital cloud.
Indeed. Always a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive. Keep learning.